Welcome to Roland Garros Live with the team from Diary of a Professional Tennis Coach. For 15 days, we'll have all the latest from Paris. Come and slide in to play with us on the Terre Battue. Hello everyone and a warm welcome back to RG Live. We're on Diary of a Professional Tennis Coach live coming to you on YouTube. We've got two amazing guests this Saturday. First up, it is Craig Boynton, CB. After retiring from playing, he became a coach in '93. He was the coach, of course, of Hubie Hurkacz for 5 very successful years, coaching Hubie to a world number 6 ranking. CB has also worked with players like Courier, Isner, and Mardy Fish in the past. And then Coach John Williams is also back on the Diary of a Professional Tennis Coach. He, of course, is the coach of double major champion Taylor Townsend. He's the founder and chief clarity coach at Elevate with John. It's an evolution-based organization at the pinnacle of human performance coaching and rehabilitation. Welcome, gentlemen. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having us.
It's been a hot afternoon in Paris. Lots of matches have finished. We've got one more underway that involves Novak Djokovic, 3-time champion. We're going to start, though, today on the women's side. It started with a match that Daria Kasatkina, now representing Australia, has beaten Paula Badosa. She, gentlemen, is going to face Mira Andreeva next. Andreeva beat Yulia Putintseva 3-1. Andreeva, of course, reached the semi-finals of Roland Garros last year. She's a career high number 6, became the youngest ever winner of a WTA 1000 title in Dubai in February, and she secured another one at Indian Wells. She is on the other side of the draw from Sabalenka and Iga Swiatek. So, gentlemen, I'm going to start with the question. Mira Andreeva, CB, has turned 18. I don't know how much you've seen of her play, but I'd love to know if she can win a major title this year.
Well, what I saw today, I think she's third in the betting, third favorite at the French. So if you're third favorite in the round of 16, yeah, you can absolutely win a slam. She's progressing along nicely. She just seems to get better and better. And when I watch her play, she just seems to be maturing at a nice pace. And it's so hard to win a slam. It's so hard to win a slam. You've got 7 matches that the weather, everything can be different. Your opponent can be different. And so to be mature and calm, you're going to have wild, crazy moments. You're going to be down. If you can stay calm, and it seems like that she's starting to develop to be able to be calmer in those moments and come through. So yeah, she's dangerous, and she absolutely can win a slam this year.
John, you're amongst the WTA players, the clarity coach, of course. Andreeva's just 18. We've seen her be very emotional in matches in the past. How important is controlling the emotions, but also being yourself on court, given how many women's matches you watch?
I mean, it's of the utmost importance. Controlling your emotions can be the difference between staying on top. It can be the difference maker when you are not on the top, when you're, on the bottom side of the score line and you need to work your way back, providing you with the ability to kind of steady the ship so you can right it and course correct and then work your way back into the match. And it can also be the difference, which I think is probably most relevant in this discussion, in understanding what you've been able to accomplish and believing in yourself based on your body of work, knowing that you can do what's necessary to go all the way. I don't know if she needs to see herself winning it, but I definitely think she should be able to confidently and clearly see herself in the finals, being able to play that last match.
Yeah. CB, you've been around a lot of ATP players. Why are these youngsters like Aruna, like an Alcaraz, and a few before then, why are they so good at that age when it generally takes the men a little bit longer to progress?
Well, those are definitely the outliers. It's really difficult in this day and age for an 18-year-old, 17, 19-year-old to come into the men's side because they're not up to where the tour level is. And mentally, at most, I mean, most men, their brains develop at 26, a little bit later. And so they're really underdeveloped as compared to their peers physically and mentally. And so when you see those outliers, that's why there's so much energy and juice around these young players. And there's so much buzz around the youth, because it doesn't really happen that often. And, Rafa winning the slam at, was it 19? I mean, that's really kind of unheard of. It really is unheard of. And so if it doesn't happen that often, it becomes a lot more interesting. And so, yeah, it's fun when it happens, but it's a kind of a generational thing, maybe one a generation.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see a Rafa again, are we? It's Mira Andreeva versus Daria Kasatkina for a place in the quarterfinals. John, on to you. Jessie Pegula has just come back from a set down against Marketa Vondrousova. You coach Taylor Townsend. It seems like the US women are doing really well on the red clay, which they're not particularly familiar with. How and why do you think there's been more success just recently on the red stuff?
I think just, there's probably the IQ level of the current crop of players, on the American side is really high. And I don't necessarily mean tennis IQ, although that's valid and referenceable in this example. I think the IQ in that they fully embrace what type of player they are and how they can use their game to be successful on other surfaces other than typical US hard courts.
Yeah. Craig, do you agree with that, coming from the US as well?
I do. And plus, they're also getting more reps, more familiar with it. The clay court season, the red clay court season is a long season. And so what you're seeing at the beginning of the season isn't nearly what you see at the end. At the end of the season, they're all seasoned. They're ready to go. They know what to expect. They're prepared, and they're just good. And, if you're good, if you're better than someone and you've had weeks and weeks to learn how to get in and out of quarters and slide and play defense and offense, and you know that to your game, you're probably going to win. And they're just really good players.
When you work with Hubie, who's been to the fourth round on a couple of occasions, did you work with a clay court specialist in movement? Did you kind of understand how to do it? What was your process?
Well, he grew up on clay, being from Poland and being from Europe. So it takes a couple of weeks, even if you're really seasoned on the clay. You hadn't been on the clay for a long bit of time, because most of the players don't go down to South America at the beginning of the year. So you really haven't been on clay since the last, Olympics last year, but the last French Open. So it just takes a bit of time, the movement, getting in and out of quarters, sliding into the ball, sliding back out. So it just takes a bit of time to be familiar with it. There are different muscles, there's different movement, and then gradually putting it into drill form, then point form, then set form, then tournament form. And I could, Monte Carlo, you would go right from Miami, like right into Monte Carlo, if you did well. And the level of play in Monte Carlo isn't nearly as high as the level of play in Paris, just because you don't have the reps for it. But everyone's in the same boat. It just takes a bit of time.
John, when you start with Taylor Townsend on the clay courts, do you get there early? Do you have a different process than you might do when you go back to hard courts?
No, my first consideration is always, whenever there's a surface transition, there's an increased element of risk for injury. So the first thing is acclimating the body. So just like, now, going from clay to grass, we will already start implementing some of our physical processes and procedures to prepare the body for the grass court. And then as we move and transition from grass to hard court, we'll start that process, with the appropriate measures and countermeasures there. But I think the adaptation phase is often overlooked. And as Craig, pointed out, there are different, and sometimes the same muscles used in very different ways depending on the surface. And I think if you don't address those things, then you are kind of derelict in responsibility, because the player is going to suffer. And that suffering doesn't necessarily mean injury. It could just mean prolonged recovery times from high quality or high intensity training sessions, which then delays, the progress for the next session and so on.
Yeah, good point. Let's look at other results. More success for the US women. Haley Baptiste has beaten Jessica Buzaz-Minero 6-1. Madison Keys took out Sophia Kenin in a battle of two major champions. Keys winning that one 7-5 in the third, now leads the head-to-head 4-1 against the former Australian Open champion. And Coco Gauff has beaten Marie Boskova 1-6. Coco, a semi-finalist last year. In the first set, she won 100% of first service points. Boskova led 5-3 in the second, but Coco came back and has now won the most clay court matches this season, along with Ukraine's Alina Svitolina, 14. CB, Coco Gauff, a lot has been talked about the forehand. We know how good the serve is when it's on. She looks like she's steadied the ship, though, doesn't she? She's been to the final of both Madrid and Rome. She's been to the final here in Roland Garros. Are you a believer in Coco Gauff?
I am. Yeah. I think one thing that she does really well, she gets off bad moments. I mean, you can look at her and she could have a moment of bad body language, but it's gone. And that's okay. If that's the way to deal with it, if it doesn't bleed into the next point, but she can have really bad serving days or forehand days, but man, she's right there for the next point. And I think it was Rome. Was it Rome where she was at night and had that against the Chinese girl where she had 15 double faults and her forehand was all over the show, and she just gutted it out. I mean, it's like, if you're not playing well, you better compete well.
Yeah, she beat Zheng Qinwen 7-6 in the third in the semis.
Was that Rome?
Yes, that was Rome.
Yeah, it was Rome. So watching that match, and it was just, as a coach, I look at what you do in between points as much as I do what you do during the point. And she just didn't have her best day, and she just has this element of toughness, even though she can be a little pouty after an error, but that's okay because, man, she brings it and she just keeps coming. And that second set, at the 7-6 second set, I think at 5-all there were eight breaks of serve, and she just kept on coming, got broke back, broke back, and just kept on playing. And I think she competes really, really well, and she's a fabulous athletic player. So those two things together make for some good results coming, I think.
John, when you watch, say, Coco Gauff, I mean, her athleticism is incredible, isn't it? And her desire to compete. Is that innate? Is that being built in her? How does that happen?
I think it's a combination. You can have all those attributes, but if the environment doesn't support it or cultivate it, then you're probably not going to display that. And if you do, then you're an extreme outlier, and you're probably going to remove yourself from that environment anyway and find a home where it's more comfortable for you. So I think innately, she comes from a family of athletes. Yes. Mom was an athlete. Dad was an athlete. Her brothers are athletes. They have an athletic culture in the family, in the house. So I don't think it's a far stretch that she would have grown up competitive. I don't think it's a far stretch to believe that she probably had to endure some tough situations, in the four walls of homes with younger brothers ribbing her, torturing her, so on and so forth. So I think all of that kind of complements her ability to be a competitor and to continue to find ways to challenge herself within the sport, on a level of, okay, here's where I am. Can I be one notch higher today? Can I figure out how to do this better? And I think, to my earlier point, once you have a body of work that you can look back on, I mean, let's not forget, she is a Grand Slam champion. So I think once you have a body of work that you can look back on, that draws, a certain amount of confidence and consistency for you.
Yeah. CB, any thoughts on that?
I think you're in the environment, but then you can always learn to be a competitor. And so when the athleticism and the competitive nature come in together, that's when you've got to have that to win slams. And I couldn't agree more. But the one thing I want to say, look out. Let's talk about Madison Keys. You know why it's what's so unusual about Madison Keys' opportunity? She can win the Grand Slam, right?
Yeah,
for sure.
That would be. Why not?
Available. And what she won the Australian saving match points in the semis. She saved 3 today. You never know. Just saying.
Oh, I like this prediction.
Just saying. Hot take. But no, I mean, and we talk about Madison for a second. What is she doing better? Is she hitting the ball better? Is she moving better? Maybe. Is she as strong? Maybe. But what is she doing ultimately? She's getting off bad moments much quicker. They're not lingering. And she's problem solving a little bit better. So, to John's point, like, what's between here and what the thoughts are going on here is sometimes much more important than actually how you're hitting the ball and how you're striking and how you're actually playing the tennis. It's your reaction to it.
John, you wanted to say something?
I did. I just wanted to add that, Maddie was one of my considerations for, maybe an underrated opportunist in this tournament, because I think this surface plays very, very well for her ball. She doesn't hit with a ton of spin or shape. And when her ball lands in the clay, it tends to stay low and skid, making it really difficult for someone with a more extreme grip to be able to pick those balls up and be offensive off of her shots. And for Maddie, it's her rally ball is that. That's not even her going for things. That's her rally ball. So if she is able to find her form and get into a rhythm and a groove like she did leading up to the semis and ultimately the finals in Australia, she could be an extremely difficult player to get past on the way to the finals.
And you look at her, she plays Halle Baptiste. It's a tough matchup at this point. They all are, but she would be considered the favorite. And then potentially play Coco, where, to your point, her rally ball is flattened through the court. And if it's a hot day, that's just going to compress and make the ball faster. And if she can play fast through Coco's forehand, which is the extreme grip, then that's semis. If you're saying, and I can see a pathway to the finals.
Right.
And if she were to play Sabalenka, she's already beaten her in the finals of Australia, so she knows the road to do it. Might be a little different wrinkle on clay, but for the most part, structurally, she's got the roadmap and how to win, and she's done it in a slam, so she's already jumped that hurdle.
Yeah.
So I'm excited for it. I'd like to see her. I'd like to see her be in contention to potentially go to Wimbledon and one more notch for the calendar Grand Slam. That'd be a fun story.
That would be very exciting. We were actually having a chat on the podcast, I think it was yesterday, about how Madison Keys' game is really elevated now that she's working with her husband and a former ATP player, Bjorn Fratangelo. It just seems, and we were speaking, weren't we, a little bit before we came on air, about how great coaches essentially try to coach themselves out of a job. And it seems that has happened. I really like Bjorn. When I hear him speak to Maddie, he just gives her one or two things, very, very calm, doesn't get too emotional. She gets on with the job. And just once in a while, he'll poke some information forward. CB, I wondered what you thought about the Keys Fratangelo relationship.
Well, you have to know your player, and I would imagine that Bjorn knows his player better than any coach knows his player there. And you package the information, you give it to the best way that the player can digest it easily. It needs to be concise, it needs to be familiar, and it needs to be positive. And so I would imagine that they go about the game plan beforehand, and they have a clear roadmap of either how she needs to play That's another thing. You're going to give information only that how she needs to play, or does she want it layered that, okay, in this situation, I want to go to this side or do this or whatnot. So that needs to be presented in the way that's best for Maddie.
Yeah.
And it's nice if I'm kind of have a crisis inside of me and I look up and I see my coach with calm, it's not a problem. We've been here before. You know how to do it. Just here's one thing. That can be the difference of getting through that moment in a positive way or adding to the stress. If you say the wrong thing or you say too much or you say it in, sometimes you need to say it in a way to get their attention, but whatever is needed at that moment, what's the best for the player. And Bjorn's he seems to be very, very good at that, as hopefully he would, because he's married to her. And I mean, they can talk about things all the time. And so it seems to be doing great. I think a lot of small things have happened for Madison that make a massive difference for her in her game.
Yeah. It's those little details, isn't it? Like who put out the garbage the day before, just to make sure.
Well, hopefully Bjorn's doing that. Hopefully Bjorn's doing all that stuff. So all she has to focus on is first serve percentage and getting the forehand right down the line. So hopefully he's doing all that grunt work for her.
John, when Taylor's in a bit of a rough patch during a match, do you say anything? Do you wait for her to ask you questions? How do you approach it?
I usually try to be proactive and a little preemptive. I am not a massive talker. I try to only say things that.
Oh, that's not true.
You've been talking to my wife again. I try to only say things that are meaningful and useful at the time. So
yeah.
I think as Craig said, every player or coach has to have their communication dynamic kind of mapped out and well orchestrated, and you can tell the teams that have worked through that. First and foremost, for me, I'm always looking at, is what I'm going to say valuable right now? Or do I just want to say it because I feel like I can say it? And if it's not valuable, then I just keep my mouth shut. But to answer your question directly, it depends. If she can't figure something out, or if it's taking her a bit longer to figure it out, then I'll ask her a question that'll prompt the answer.
Okay.
And always I want her to find the solution. If she's searching for the solution and for whatever reason, because, we all have our good days and bad days and good moments and bad moments. If for whatever reason the solution evades her, then I'm happy to give her a little clue or, throw her a breadcrumb that when she picks it up, she'll realize, oh, okay. And we communicate in a very concise manner. So I can say one word or give her a phrase or, just a little blip, and she'll, yes, okay, got it. And that's how it should be.
You need to know your player.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We spoke a little bit about Madison Keys perhaps playing Coco Gauff in the next round. Coco has to play Ekaterina Alexandrova first. Alexandrova has beaten Veronika Kudermetova 2-2. She's one of those players, Alexandrova, and I've commentated on a lot of her matches, which can be unplayable. She's a little bit in the Madison Keys spectrum, Craig, where she hits the ball very, very hard. And if the weather conditions are in her favor, sometimes nobody has got a chance against her. I presume that is another player that Coco is going to find quite difficult, depending on the circumstances.
I think a lot of it might have to do with the weather. The French is the one slam where the weather, it fluctuates the most. And if it's a hot, dry day, believe it or not, the courts can play much quicker than Wimbledon.
Wow.
And that's, it can really get through. But if it's an overcast, rainy day where if you guys are watching the French, look in the back where they still have the tarps. The tarps are down and they're at the back of the court. And on the wet days, the ball will roll on those tarps and pick up the moisture, and it'll make the balls a lot heavier. And so the heavier the ball will favor the more neutral or defensive player playing option. And
Yes.
if you're all offense on a day that it's like you're feeling like you're hitting a bowling ball, then you can't hit through the court. And so a lot of it, you might not have plan B. And so it's just going to be difficult because Coco will be able to run down winner after winner after winner. Yeah. And eventually you might redline and stack up the unforced error count. So it just depends a lot on the weather, in my opinion.
Wow.
There.
So Ekaterina Alexandrova will definitely want warm, and Coco will want it a little bit more humid and a little bit wetter, I should imagine, for that match. It's going to be an interesting one, that's for sure. And let's head on to the men's side now.
Well,
gentlemen,
hold on,
Yannick Sinner.
Hold on for a second, Candy.
All right, go for it.
I've got a slightly different, not that I disagree with what you said at all, Craig. I think that obviously for every player, the weather is always a factor when you're dealing with, balls and changing conditions. But I think in this matchup, I think Coco's probably got the advantage here, because let's remember when Coco first came on tour, Coco was a retriever. She was an extremely defensive player. It's only recently that she's really dialed in her ability to be offensive, right? So on this surface, because it's clay, ball's going to slow down anyway. And that gives Coco an advantage because she definitely has the notch in terms of athleticism, but she also has, surface favoring her regardless of the conditions, just by virtue of the surface. On the flip side, Coco hits with a bit more shape, which means she's got the ability to get the ball up and out of Alexandrova's strike zone, which for her is a big problem because she doesn't like balls outside of her strike zone.
Right.
When the ball's not in that sweet spot, then it could be a problem. The second component is Coco's got the ability to play 2 or 3. This is to your point, Craig. She can run down winners. She's got the ability now not just to run down winners and throw them back in the court, just kind of keep it in play, but she can also lace, those defensive returns, if you will, in a more aggressive manner. And Alexandrova does not move as well as Coco does. So I think that could be, a favorable opportunity for Coco.
Yeah.
Keep it an open court match. Make it on speed then. Yeah. Good point.
Right.
Good point.
Right.
It's going to be a fifth matchup between those. Coco leads the head-to-head 3-1, but they've never played on clay before. They have played twice on hard and twice on grass. Right, let's get on to the men's side, Craig. Let's start with you. Yannick Sinner. We know all about the 3-month ban. He's been off the court, then got to the final in Rome. He lost 3 games to Jerzy Lehečka. A 90-minute match. He won the first 11 games in that encounter. That was mind-blowing. Your thoughts?
Mind-blowing is right.
Yeah.
The 3-month ban that Yannick had, that might be in an ironic way, that could be kind of the seal for the rest of the guys, because he was rested and be able to work on his game. I was really impressed that he made finals of Rome.
Yeah.
Because normally when you come back after 3 months, you can practice all you want, but you've got blisters and little niggles here and there from not playing stressed matches. So for him to get to the finals of Rome was just an added bonus. And now he looks so fresh. There's an undercurrent going on the men's side about how too much they're playing and they're tired. Demonor said something like that, but that's the complete opposite of Yannick. He looks fresh and he is just bone crushing the ball. I'd love to see Sinner Draper, just to see that matchup. But man, Yannick looks really fresh and really sharp.
Yeah, John, that's a big advantage, isn't it? Going into the second half of the season, that Sinner's now had 3 months off.
It's a massive advantage. You think of how many points his competitors have played, and then you think of how many hours on the court on top of those points that they've played, practice. Yeah. Then you think about how many hours of travel and transit and transition that they've had to endure. Like like I've said before, the on-court stuff is one component, but everything that has to happen in order to facilitate the on-court stuff, that's what most people just overlook because they don't understand the extreme demand there. And, him having basically a vacation for 3 months, that's a massive advantage for him, especially at this point in the season, because what do we have next? We have the most demanding surface physically and challenging surface physically coming up right after this, which is grass, right? And then we go back to, okay, one last final round of abuse for the body onto the hard court. And I mean, he's demonstrating, why he is where he is, and with clinical precision, outlining, that he wasn't just sitting at home resting on his laurels or hanging out on the Amalfi Coast. So,
I was actually in Monte Carlo for the first time this year, and he was training there with his team.
I would like to see if Jannik runs through the year. Next year, if he takes 2 months off.
Yeah.
I mean, why not?
Craig, I think logically that would probably be the plan, but I think financially and economically that would sway the decision-making process. You look at how these guys are playing exhibitions in the 3-week off season that they have.
True.
And it's largely because of the financial, incentives.
But don't you think that what I see happening on the tour is the guys that are mandatory events, they're a minimum of 29 weeks where they have to be available. And that's before you throw on a 250 for a grass chain, for a surface change like a Stuttgart or a Laver Cup or a United Cup or a Davis Cup. And so where the ATP is, you get your bonus if you play all the 9 Master Series. If the guys take a couple of Master Series off and then go play an exhibition, they can make up a lion's share of that money in a weekend. Right. And so I think the guys aren't dumb, and you'll start seeing maybe there's a shift to this because, to Demonar's point, he's burned out already, and it's May, and he's top 10 guy. He's a marquee guy. And so I think the ATP wanting to get rid of the exos, they're actually going against them because now the money is so big. And to your point, what was it? The Six Kings or what it was?
The Six Kings in Saudi.
To show up there, it was a lot of money. And so, I mean, I'd just be on the lookout for that coming down the pike I'd be really concerned if I was the ATP.
I think they'll have a contingency built in, just based on my experience. They'll make a rule change and
they'll do something.
Right.
Yeah.
So CB, do you feel sympathy with the players? Alex de Minaur and you're right, Casper Ruud were both pretty frustrated, weren't they, by the length of the season, saying they were pretty burnt out, pretty tired, and a bit injured in Casper Ruud's case. When you were working with Hubie, did he have the same problems? And can you see it from both sides?
Well, I always wanted to do a study, and I wouldn't know how to go about gathering all the information. But before they made these Master Series 2 weeks, you would have X amount of days that you play and Y amount of money. And so you have whatever the number was. And so now I would like to do it's X amount of days plus and Y amount of money plus, and to see how much that's increased. So, because you could be getting paid more, but at a higher rate, at a higher kind of daily rate or tournament rate, or however you want to do the math. I'm not so sure that it's worth it. I mean, you can only put 10 pounds of clothes in a 10-pound bag. And it seems like these top guys are saying, I'm putting 12 pounds, I'm putting 15 pounds or kilos for whatever, you guys, however you want to say it, but they're playing too much. And I saw this a couple years ago. They're just playing too much. They're having to be available, in my opinion, too much, because in a sense, what Jannik did for 3 months is he's not stressing his central nervous system. And when your central nervous system gets stressed, that's when you burn out, and that's when you need a break. You can't go anymore. And so if the better you do, the more behind the eight ball you are, ultimately going into the biggest prize, which is a slam. So you have these lead ups and these big tournament lead ups, and you win a Masters series, which is great. But then it's like, okay, you got to do it again. And then you got to do it again. And now they have, I think it was Hamburg, which is a 500.
Correct.
The week before the French Open. It's like, guys, like somebody's got to take a break at some point. Like you just can't keep spinning your wheels week after week after week.
Yeah.
It used to be Lyon, I think, in Geneva for 250s for guys that just didn't get enough play, like Novak did this year.
Yeah.
That's what those were designed for. But now a 500, I mean, and then it's like, well, if you're playing it, I got to play it because now it's opportunity lost. And I just have a real concern that there's just too much going on, and guys are just going to start taking timeouts or figuring out other ways to make money, or getting hurt or getting burned out. And it's just, I just don't want to see the greats of the top 10 and the greats of the game. And even the other guys that are chasing to get to where these guys are, they have to play week after week after week. Just don't think it's the best situation.
Yeah, it feels sometimes, doesn't it, like a kind of 3-week Tour de France, the year-long tennis season. It just keeps going and it's going uphill. John, are you hearing the same noises on the WTA side? Because we've heard a lot from the ATP, and I don't think I've spoke to anybody on the ATP side that likes the 2-week 1000s.
No, it's the same. I mean, I think it's, as an entrepreneur and a capitalist, I get it. I get why they would want to do it, but I don't understand the contradiction in how you claim you are all about, player health and longevity and safety, and then you do something like this, which directly opposes that viewpoint and positioning. I think that point could be, and should be a major point of discussion and contention. I think there's a happy medium, but as for just arbitrarily doubling the amount of time that a player has to be, in one particular spot competing, while simultaneously enforcing, these premier mandatories as they have on the WTA, and they have something similar on the ATP. I think that's a contradiction in the express benefit of the player, for sure.
Yeah, fair enough. Just going back quickly to CB, this is a quote from Sinner. He said, "My coach had his birthday yesterday, and usually when he has his birthday, I don't play good. Luckily, I wasn't playing yesterday." And I wondered about the level of superstition in the world of tennis.
Everyone is either a little superstitious, not superstitious at all, or very superstitious. I find that the most superstitious athletes I've ever been around are baseball players.
Yes.
I mean, if a guy goes 4 for 4 at the plate and he had chicken for dinner, he's got chicken for the rest of his life. I guess this is a little superstitious or whatnot. I'm glad for Yannick, and I don't know if this was Darren or Simone's birthday. Simone. So I'm glad that for Simone and their team that he didn't play on the birthday. But you think about it, that's just something inside of him. That's just a white noise. A day is a day is a day. An opponent is opponent. You get ready the same way. So I'm sure Yannick is strong enough mentally the next time one of his coaches plays that he'll play very well.
John, I was what I call a failed tennis player, but I remember having weird things like this. If you won a match the day before, like CB said, with the food or wearing a particular outfit, it could even come down to the underpants. It got that bad at one point. What do you think about superstitions?
I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan. I think that I've been in situations, with even doubles matches where, the team from the teammate, the doubles teammate would say, "Oh, well, we changed the seating configuration. The last match we were sitting like this. Aren't we going to sit the same way this time?" And I was like, "Why? Today's a different day."
Makes no difference.
Right. So I just think it's a recipe for disaster, because whenever you're looking outside of yourself for anything that can influence you, then you're already looking in the wrong place, and you're using up bandwidth in an inefficient fashion, and it's directing you to a place that's not really going to serve you. You're only going to have heartbreak and disappointment there. So
well said.
Sounds like a recipe for good fun.
Yeah.
By the way, Sinner has won 17 straight matches in major competition. Of course, he won the 24 US Open. He won 25 Australian Open CB. Is he your favourite to win here in Roland Garros?
Well, you talk about, what's it called? The new two. So if Sinner plays Carlos, for whatever reason, Carlos has the magic dust to frustrate him.
Yes.
But Carlos, sometimes Carlos can do walkabouts, and he's had some kind of interesting slam results. So if Carlos isn't there, then obviously it's Yannick's turn, and it still might be Yannick's turn if they play. But the two dark horses that I let's not forget about are Musetti and Draper. Those are the two that I think his time. I think he really truly believes his time is to become a Grand Slam champion. Jack emotionally might not be there yet, but his game is. I like what the improvements I've seen in his game, and I think at one day those will be part of the big four, or at least the next three or whatnot, and they are definitely the next wave of players. If one of the big ones stub their toe, they're ready, just waiting in the wings. So those are the two that I'm interested to see. Obviously, you got to take Sinner or Carlos. I mean, if you had one pick, it's gonna be one of those two. But those other two are the ones that I'm interested in seeing how they do.
All right. Talking about Jack Draper, he's going to play Alexander Bublik, who beat Roca from Portugal in straight sets. Draper's the 5th seed, semi-finalist, of course, of US Open last year, finalist of Madrid this year. He beat João Fonseca in 3 straight sets. Fonseca, the 18-year-old, had beaten the 30th seed, Hubie Hurkacz, your former player, Craig, in the first round. What have you made so far of Fonseca? And were you surprised that he went down in 3 straights to Draper today?
Well, talking about your earlier point at 18, I've watched Fonseca. I watched a little bit of the match with Hubie. And Fonseca was high energy, high opportunist, ball speed high. And the next match, he played Herbert from France.
That's right.
A little bit lower energy, a little bit lower ball speed. And then today, he just didn't show up. Draper played solid, played well. He didn't play out of his mind.
Yeah.
But I don't know. With João, there's so much noise around him. I don't know how much expectations weighing on his shoulders. He seems to have the whole country in the stands rooting him on. I don't know how he can if he drowns that out, but he was the completely different player in every way than first round against Hubie, where maybe he's the underdog in both, but he just didn't have anywhere near that level of emotional positivity, energy, aggressiveness. He just kind of laid down and he was dictated upon, when normally he's a hunter. So, it's growing. He's 18. So you need to be in this environment, and you got to be able to shield out the expectations of others, but also have an expectation of yourself. And when you come to the court and you have an expectation of your level, and that's what you strive for. But if you're listening to the expectations of others of outcomes, and at the first match, the announcers were basically giving Fonseca the trophy, like this guy's going to win, and it's like, yeah, there's 6 more matches, but if he can play to be able to play like that 7 times in a row, it might sound simple, but it's not easy. Yeah. And so this is just what he needs to learn to do.
Yeah. We know about the Carnival in Brazil, John, and every time João steps onto the court, it's rather like that, isn't it? Wherever he is. And for an 18-year-old to sustain the level and the energy that he has on court, but then also cope with all the media attention off it. There's a lot going on. How do players generally cope with that? Because what we see on the court is only a tiny part of actually their entire lives as a tennis player. Sure.
It's very difficult, and it's, to Craig's point, it's a learned skill. Some players have it naturally, where they just don't really pay attention. They don't absorb what people are saying about them and what the crowds are doing. They look at it as a novelty and really nothing more. But that individual is very rare and certainly not often seen in tennis. Yeah. So I think, that's to Craig's point, something he has to learn. And what I call it, Craig, I think you might get a chuckle out of this term. This is a classic example for me of João needs to build his windurance, because as he continues playing, continues winning,
I like that.
He will need to figure out how to build his windurance. Can you keep your systems and your processes in place, being able to rise and elevate to the moment, but when the moment's over, being able to immediately drop down so you're not burning resources.
Yeah, that's great. That's a good one. Yeah, it's a real one.
If you look at the great ones on both the men's and women's side through the generations, this is just across the board. Those players had the ability to do that. Back in Borg's day, the match was over, they go, have 5 or 6 beers before they had to play again. Right. Sometimes before, while they were waiting for their match to be called. But that's how they wound down and came down off of those highs, so that they didn't continue running hot when it was necessary and then face burnout. And João needs to learn that. He's 18, so everything he does is youthful exuberance and energy. And he's Brazilian. So you combine those two things together, it's like nitroglycerin and dynamite.
Right.
And then you have the size and capacity, the weight of the moment, and hearing the stands. I mean, it's a recipe for greatness, but it's also a recipe for derailment in this case. I'm not going to say disaster. I don't think it's a disaster. It's his learning curve.
Right.
So I think that is where
I really like that saying. And also to your point, for 2 weeks, 17 days, you have to be on, but you can't be all the way on off days.
Right.
And so that's part of the endurance is not to detach so much where you get rusty, but not to be, to your point, so high and energetic on the day off, where, I mean, and now that you say that, it looks exactly to your point. He looked like he had no energy.
Right.
So he probably, to your point, I had to guess, he wasn't able to kind of lower that bar and understand that that's behind me. Okay, I'm going to relax. His nervous system was going full boat the whole 48, 72 hours. And it just never had time to reset and relax and to recharge. So I think that's a fabulous, fabulous saying.
Just thinking, if I were to speak to João right now and his team in an advisory capacity, I would say find Guga.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Find Guga and talk to him about how he managed.
Right.
And even if you don't understand everything he's advising you or telling you to do, just look at him as a person, model that.
Right.
Because no doubt when the match was over, he's just.
Right. What did you do on your days off? I know what to do on the court, but how did you manage the downtime?
Correct.
Yeah.
And the in-between time. Somebody said to me a long time ago, it's within the fine margins that you identify the components necessary for excellence.
Yeah, and that's a big one. Absolutely.
I think I'm going to leave you with that, guys.
That's it. John's out.
Yeah,
that's a great one.
Drop.
Yeah, boom.
But I do need
that was awesome.
Well, it was something that happened at the Australian Open, going back to Madison Keys, and Bjorn Fratangelo said sometimes on our off days we didn't go and practice.
Right.
You know, we just stayed away from the court because she knows how to hit a ball.
Right.
She doesn't need to go and hit for 30 minutes and then take the time to warm up and warm down and chat and do all that stuff. Let's leave. And it seems so sensible.
Yes.
Well, if your biggest asset is your mind, then you need to relax that on off days. So
yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, really good. Someone who's a little bit more experienced and knows almost what it's like to win a major is Alexander Zverev. He's beaten Flavio Cobolli in 3 sets. Cobolli, we were speaking about Hamburg. He won that 500 level event coming up to Roland Garros and perhaps just wore out himself. Zverev said, "This is a tournament I look forward to the most during the year." He was on Philippe Chatrier today. He's reached at least the semi-finals on each of his last 4 appearances in Roland Garros. Craig, I'm sure you know Zverev and his camp very well indeed. Are his chances of winning a major about over because of Sinner and because of Alcaraz, or do you think he's got at least one in him?
Oh, I think so. I think he has the opportunity to get one or more in him. Okay. It's just he's been in the finals 3 times, and I didn't see the match point against Dominic at the Open, but he needs to, in my opinion, he gets to the tippity top of the mountain, and to get to that next step, to get to the top of the mountain, you got to have the belief, and you have to keep it just like any other point, which is not easy. But his next opponent is Griekspoor.
Yes,
and they have some epic battles. So they have been nip and tuck. I think it's been this year. And going back to maybe the fall of last year. Yep. So this is going to be an interesting battle because Talon matches up well against Zverev, because Zverev will give you space, will give you time, and Talon with his forehand. Talon's another one. He gets to the tail end of the matches with Zverev, and Zverev just seems to find a way to get to eke out. But I think Talon got him once this year.
Yes, so he did in Indian Wells.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting matchup. I look forward to seeing that.
It's 7-2 to Zverev. How about that? But like you said, I'm just looking at the results. Sasha won in Munich 6-4 in the third. And in Indian Wells, Griekspoor won on the hard court 7-6 in the third. They've had some real long ones, including here in the third round, 7-6 in the fifth to Zverev back last year at Roland Garros. That's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, it's a match. I mean, professional tennis is matchups in the day, and that's a good matchup for Talon.
Yeah.
Doesn't always get the W, but he puts a fright into Zverev.
Griekspoor has beaten Ethan Quinn in 5 sets, took 3 hours and 16 minutes. In the Battle of the Brits, Cam Norrie beat Jacob Fernley in straight sets. And Novak Djokovic, gentlemen, is playing right now against Misolic, ranked 153 in the world. His upper set is Novak. John, 38 years of age now, Novak Djokovic, but he's still a commanding presence. He's won Geneva in the run-up, 100 ATP titles. Put that into perspective for us, given what you've seen on tour.
It's a massive accomplishment and incomprehensible body of work. And as I've said several times before, when talking on the subject, is difficult for me being, a mortal, if you will, to understand the level of motivation that is required to continue producing this level of quality for this long and deep in a career. Yeah. We saw, Roger's body fail him, taking him out of the sport. We saw Rafa's body fail him in grand fashion, taking him out of the sport. We saw Murray's body fail him, taking him out of the sport. Novak, I don't know. It must be something in those Serbian genetics, I guess. But, his body is obviously suffering the plight of Father Time. But he seems like he is just too stubborn at this point to yield. He is not ready to tap out quite yet. And that in and of itself is admirable. I think he's probably lost a bit of his locker room power.
Yeah.
Everybody genuinely views him as, on any given day, Novak can win whatever he's playing in. But I don't think that just that inherent fear of seeing his name across from yours in the draw is there to the same extent anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, that's relevant. CB, do you think that Novak has lost his locker room surprise, his intimidation factor?
I mean, I think he has a massive respect still in the locker room, but when you're going out to play him, you haven't lost in your mind already. I think guys think that, I play well, I can be in the match. And if I'm in the match, I can win the match. And, Novak, his results aren't as consistent. But I will say Novak reminds me of a country and Western song that says, I'm not as good as I once was, but I'm as good once as I ever was. And so he can be good once, as he can bring back the level more than once, obviously, but it's not as consistent as it was in the past. And so for him, if he's got to beat the likes of a Sinner and Carlos back to back, I think that's a real challenge for him.
Yeah.
But he loves challenges. So, but to John's point, then it's like, okay, physically, can you do it physically? We know you think you can do it mentally, but can you do it physically? And I think if he does do that, then I think he could. That's his time to ride into the sunset.
Yeah, that's a very good point. John, anything to add?
No, perfectly summed up. Perfectly.
I love that. What's the song? That's a great song.
Who sings it? It's a great song and it's a great video. I don't recall, but that line always stuck with me. He's in a ballroom fight and it's like, I'm not as good as I once was, but I'm as good once as I ever was. And it's just, it's a great lyric. And those are kind of how you describe the great champions that maybe are not as sharp as they were, but man, they can turn back time for a few hours, and then those top players can be in the middle of it.
Yeah, very good. Right, let's just have a quick look at tomorrow's matches. We've got Alexei Popyrin against Tommy Paul. Ben Shelton goes up against Carlos Alcaraz for the third time. Carlos 2-0. Francis Tiafoe will go up against Daniel Altmaier. He leads that head-to-head 2-0. And then Lorenzo Musetti versus Holger Rune. Rune has a 2-love lead in that one. John, which of those matches do you like the most? Which one will you be watching, if any?
I think I'll save that for last. I think the Musetti match will be a war of attrition. I think that's going to be an extremely physical match, and whoever comes out of that match is going to have a difficult time gearing up for their next opponent. Yeah. So I think that could be very telling for who's ever waiting for the winner of that match on the other side.
And then CB, we've got Paul, Shelton, and Tiafoe. Which of those three do you think has got the best chance of going the furthest on the US side?
Well, I'd say the player that's playing the best in the whole draw is Sinner. And then the next one, believe it or not, is Francis. This is the best I've ever seen Francis play. He has gone through 9 straight sets, and it hasn't even been close. Yeah. And so he plays Altmaier. If Francis can keep that level, I think he'll be in control. Tommy Paul, from what I'm reading, has been nursing some sort of ab ailment, and he's been on court for a long bit of time. I think he'll get through that. And Ben and Carlos, that's popcorn. I mean, that's just popcorn. Yeah. Let's sit down with a bucket of popcorn and enjoy that.
We're hoping to get Brian Shelton on the podcast as well. So keep your eyes peeled for that one.
Let me throw this at you, Craig. If Ben Shelton radically reduces unforced errors, what happens in the direction of that match?
Well, Carlos is one where you never know what you get with Carlos. I mean, he can be unbelievable, and like I said before, he's thrown in some stinkers. And you know, if Ben's getting ahead and holding with relative ease, and he can play safe without being on defense. From Ben had the walkover second round. I watched the first round match down 2-1 to Sonego, and then kind of changed and went to the slice to set up the forehand and started hitting the forehand down the line. And with Ben, I always feel if he can play with a little higher energy and a little higher enthusiasm, like not like college crazy, but like when Ben is, you know, like this, and Brian, they're like this and fight. It's tough with 5 sets, but if he can have that right balance, and like you said, play and limit the unforced errors, and when the green light ball goes, and really put Carlos under the pressure and serve well. And Carlos has one of his matches. I mean, he just had a real brutal match with Duzmar. Yeah. So, I mean, I can see Ben. I can definitely see Ben getting on top of that one and stealing the W.
All right. 2-0 in the head-to-head for Carlos. They've never met on clay. Both matches have been straight sets, but as with most Ben Shelton matches, there's always a couple of tie breaks in there. So interesting matchup to come. On the WTA side, gentlemen, Jasmine Paolini faces Elena Svitolina, Elena Rybakina versus Iga Swiatek, Ludmila Samsonova against Jung Chin-wen, and Aryna Sabalenka versus Amanda Anisimova. The one that pops out, doesn't it? Rybakina versus Swiatek, 5-4 in the head-to-head to the 12th seed Rybakina, who won the lead-up tournament in Strasbourg, playing a lot better. She seems like she's a bit more settled off the court. We know all about the publicised incident that's going on with her. But to Iga, CB, have you thought that she's looked a little less panicked than perhaps she has for some of 2025?
Less panicked, but I still think the panic button is still, it's a smaller button, but it's still kind of, it's smaller, but it's still there. I got the pleasure of knowing Iga through United Cup through Poland.
Yes,
she's so good. If she can just find a way to stay relaxed, like we talked about through all the beginning of the broadcast, to calm minds prevail. If you can stay calm when it's stormy out, you know, she's so good. She plays so well. She hits the ball so hard. First time I got to see her courtside, I was just like, man, you hit the ball harder than Hubie does. Like, it's crazy how good she is and how athletic. But you've got to let your mind be able to let those things come out, and that's kind of been the issue. Her thought patterns have not always been the clearest and the most positive. So I hope for her that she can play a good match. And it's just it's weird to see a 5 next to her name. She's seated right here. I'm looking, and she's in the middle of the draw. I'm like, this doesn't. It's like kind of what happened with Novak when that started with him. It's just kind of odd. So, you know, for personal reasons, I'd like to see Iga get through that. But that's going to be another popcorn match. A lot of popcorn tomorrow. A lot of popcorn.
Yeah, there's so much popcorn.
Yeah.
John, Iga Swiatek 6-0 the wrong way for her against Yelena Ostapenko. And she was asked in press, of course, now avoiding Ostapenko. She's going to face Rybakina. There was no good draw really for her. Had lost all 6 matches to Ostapenko, as I said earlier, 5-4 down against Rybakina. How much do those matchups matter when, say, Taylor plays?
That went in a direction I didn't see. Those matches don't matter at all, honestly. We look at every match as an opportunity to show what it is we've been working on and what she's capable of producing. So and as I opened, we don't look at the draws ahead. You know, usually night before, for me, just enough advance that I can prepare, you know, tactical match notes and strategy in an appropriate amount of time without staying up till 3 a.m. Although I have had to do that. But it doesn't matter, because in order to advance, you have to beat whoever is on the other side of the net.
Yeah.
And they have to show up and they have to do the same thing. So, you know, as Craig said, it's about, you know, who's bringing their best in that moment to the court, and that's all we focus on. Once we figure out who we're playing, we figure out the game plan, then it's back on us. I shift the focus back to her, and this is what you need to do. This is how you need to do it in order to play your best tennis, period. And that's the focus.
Brilliant. Craig, we've got a great quote from Iga. She suggested she had no preference as to her last 16 opponent. And then she asked everybody in the press room, am I a good liar? Let's say it doesn't matter. Really? Oh, my God, I couldn't play poker. They're all acting out there, aren't they? Everybody is acting, both the coaches and the players. You're all trying to go, it doesn't matter who I play.
Well, you can't tell the truth. You can't give your opponent any more ammunition. It's the great with Rafa, like he was dying inside, but you never knew it. You didn't want to give your opponent anything more. But if you're 0-6 against someone, generally that's an issue, and you need to figure that out. And listen, if she played Ostapenko, she'd have to figure it out. So it's maybe a better matchup for Rybakina, obviously, if she's not 0-6 against her. So I'm sure she would rather play someone that she's not 0-6 against.
All right, final thing of the night, because I've had you for over an hour and I'm so appreciative of your time. Roland Garros Live here on Diary of a Professional Tennis Coach. Craig, put you on the spot. If you had to put your house on it, who's going to win the men's? Who's going to win the women's?
I'm going to go, if I had to put my house on it, wow. Well,
it's only a small house, I believe.
I'm going to put a Monopoly house, not a real house. I'm going to go, I'm just going to be different. I'm going to go Madison Keys.
Okay.
And the men, oh my goodness. I mean, how do you go against Yannick? I mean, he's played at this point. I mean, it's tough to go against Yannick at this point. But that's what I would do.
And John, let's ask you again. Now we've got an updated singles draw. Your choices.
I'm going to go with Coco on the women's side.
Okay.
I think she has the ability to be super disruptive. And like Craig said, on the men's side, I think I'd have to lean toward Yannick just because he's been on vacation. He's super fresh. So he can, like a 5-set match doesn't scare him because he's not running on the ragged edge right now.
Yeah.
And for a player like him who's had numerous health issues internally and externally, I think that's a huge advantage. It's a huge advantage.
You have both been amazingly generous with your time. Craig Boynton, thank you so much for joining RG Live.
Thank you for having me.
And John, thank you again for coming on and being such a superstar.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone, for watching Roland Garros Live. We will be back in less than 20. Thank you for watching Diary of a Professional Tennis Coach. Please like, subscribe and share, and we'll be back soon with another great episode.